Hey guys, in this video, we're going to be sharing with you a case study of one of the clients that we're working with in our Worship Accelerator program. If you want to learn more about that, check out the links below this video. Adam, let's dive in to what your visit was like because we recently have started doing on-site visits as part of the program where Adam, a member of the Churchfront team, will show up to actually be boots on the ground to help optimize things, upgrade things when it's necessary, to just get a ton of stuff done at a local church worship ministry. Basically, a lot of the same things that you guys see us document at our own churches, we've been able to go to other churches and do that process. So, Adam, what church did you go to? Where was it?
Yeah, so this is North Sound Church in Edmonds, Washington. So it's like just north of Seattle. So it's an awesome place to visit as well. But yeah, they're in this spot right here, and you can't see, but behind me is more of like the town square. So they're really close to where stuff is happening. Um, but as far as like inside the building, they've got these L-acoustic speakers. They've got, a QL5 mixing console, nice projectors. Like you can see the room treatment in here. Like they've got everything that they need, but what they didn't have was the training or understanding of how to run it. So here you can see a couple guys are like working on the console and figuring things out. And so it was more of like not a church tech makeover in the sense of here's the stuff to buy to make stuff happen. It's more like you have all the things, but what we really need to do is get you to understand what all of it does and use it to its best uh, capabilities. So when I was there, I didn't, you know, say buy this or buy that except for one computer that they would need for the broadcast mix. Everything else was we just optimized what they had. So a lot of time was spent on the mixing console, and that's one of the things that is hardest to do over Zoom. I can tell
Mm-hmm.
people, watch this course and learn the concepts of EQ. Like the mixing for worship course is like over 60 lessons. So it's like you can watch all of that and start to implement it, but it's really a kind of a kickstart when I'm able to be there in person and actually hear the instruments come through the console, make mix adjustments, organize their console, through the console, not through Zoom on a software that controls their mixer. So we were just able to get so much more done in a short, period of time. But beyond that, we had a church team training day. So a lot of the volunteers came, and I was able to cast some vision for, Chris and Casey have worked so hard over the last few days, and they really want these things to be improved in these ways because they care about the church and they care about you guys being able to succeed in whatever roles you're serving in, and just help them cast the vision for that, as well as kind of bolster them up in the eyes of the volunteers. And one of the bigger things we did too was remove key holders. So there were computers that a volunteer set up, but the volunteer set up with their own password as the admin, um, making it so like if Chris wanted to make an adjustment, he'd have to go through that volunteer. Um, so kind of casting vision too for, hey, we're in this together and we all want to be able to access all the computers and be confident in making adjustments and work more as a team. So it was a lot of stuff that would be harder to do over Zoom, and there's a lot of stuff left on the table that I wanted to accomplish that we're going to be able to do through Zoom. But at least we know what has to be done, and I was able to see it in person, which was really cool considering we've been done everything over Zoom for the last few years.
Yeah, just to give people context, like our accelerator program has in the past always been remote only, and we can do a lot, like a lot, especially with technology like Zoom these days, like remoting into your computers, helping you configure stuff. But what we can do even more when we actually show up at your church with ears on the ground, eyes on the ground, to help you come up with ideas. Because there might be things we see in person that a client didn't have any clue they could optimize or they could use or benefit from. So that was why we did this, and it was awesome to have Chris and Casey hop into this type of program where they're going to get that year-long support from us remotely, but then they had these 4 days to kind of like kickstart it, and now your conversations are even going to be more fruitful over Zoom as you guys update these things and continue to make progress. Walk us through, like, what'd you do day one? Because I think you got there, you flew in on a Wednesday night and then you started on a Thursday. What did you guys, maybe just walk us through each day, kind of how you focused your time?
Yeah, so the first day, let me just check my calendar and make sure I got this correct here. So my first day was the 7th there. And so I made sure that we had Google Chrome on all the production machines so that, we'd be able to remote in, and so that they would be able to remote into those computers. And then we really just dove into taking a look at what's going on. And what I wanted to do was to retune their system if it needed it. And I could have retuned the system and made some adjustments and improvements there, but they had no idea what was happening. It was like sound gets from our mixing console to the speakers, and someone like an integrator came in and set that up, and we don't have schematics for it. So a lot of it was like that, where I'd say, I want you to understand how this works. I need to understand how it works so we can make improvements. So let's chase these cables. Let's find out how signal flow gets from point A to point B and document that and take some notes so that when, even with our time in person or in the future, you on your own or with my help, we can make adjustments and understand the entire picture, like the blueprint of all the technology and how it works together.
Mhm.
And so we started with that. That was most of day one, was just figuring out what do you have and what's going on here and how does it get from here to there, as well as they have a pretty robust Dante setup, but the naming of it when you just plug a device in is pretty wonky. So we made sure that the devices were labeled, that the channels were routed properly. One of the things on the first day as well was separating their drum kit. They have an electronic drum kit, and it was getting kick, snare, and then I think full kit left, full kit right. So it was like you were adding in kick and snare to an already mixed drum kit.
Mm.
But they had a rack unit that was a stage box, so it had 8 inputs on it. So we were able to just put that next to the drum kit and plug in kick, snare, tom left, tom right, hi-hat, ride, overhead, overhead, and we had those separate channels to come into the console. They also had
Was that stage box just not being used? Was that like backstage somewhere?
It was like he had it and it wasn't working, and he like flashed the firmware, like he updated the firmware on the actual rack unit at his house and then brought it back. So it's like, hey, I have this, it's extra. And I was like, oh,
Sweet.
well, I know how we're going to use that.
Yeah.
And then
Nice.
running tracks out of like a hardware, like basically like a push, like an Ableton push, just a hardware device that has the audio samples loaded onto it,
Hmm.
and then a drum pad. So it was like, how are we going to get the click and tracks to the in-ears properly? There were speakers on the drum kit itself for monitoring. So it was like you hit the kick or you hit the snare and it comes through some little speakers that were mounted on the electronic drum kit. So that night was rehearsal. And at rehearsal, they hadn't switched to in-ears yet. And I was mixing front of house, and it was like, there's so much hi-hat coming from the stage that I can't get the mix above that. It's like the loudest thing in the mix, but
With an
faders
electric
it
kit, right?
with an electronic
Too.
Yeah,
kit. So
that's
it's
a
like,
big deal.
yeah, but they were switching to in-ears, so we were able to remove those speakers and just really clean up the stage volume, because everyone was on wedges. So it was like the keys were on wedges, the drum was on wedges, but also had drums coming out of the speakers on stage. Yeah, a lot of just assessing and then making those types of adjustments. Like, okay, here's an issue, here's the solution. We don't know what this is doing. Let's figure out what this is doing together. And they even said in their testimonial video, like, we just understand what's happening. Like,
Yeah.
it's not just some mystery that we just hope it works and that's it. It's like, okay, if there's a problem or if we want to implement something new, we understand what's happening and we can do that.
Love it.
In addition to the monitoring thing with the drum monitors, was there anything else in their infrastructure that you took away while you were there?
So wedges, they had for the longest time had the Aviom units. Um, so we made sure that everything was routed to those, and so we were able to take away some wedges on stage. Additionally, like the cabling situation, it was just like there was a lot of cables, a lot of DI boxes going different places. Um, so we were able to kind of condense that down and have it labeled properly and use the best DIs for the proper, you know, spots. The keys rig was like 6 signals coming in, and it still is. So I'm hoping, someday they're like, hey, let's just get an order main stage and just have a stereo output. That would simplify things. But part of it too is like they had volunteers that were like really passionate about doing things a certain way, and they gave them, some authority to make changes or to suggest things. So it's like they wanted to run tracks, they didn't know how. The drummer was like, "Hey, let's use this hardware device." And they're like, "Okay, like if you want to take that on and help us with that." Like now they're kind of looking at it and saying, "Well, maybe this isn't the best solution, but they used it for that time because a volunteer came and was willing to put the work in
Mm,
to make it happen." So there are things like that that they're still navigating that, but yeah, a lot of unnecessary cable runs and making sure that cables were the right length and cleaning up the stage in that way. Recommended a label maker, and Casey like labeled everything on the stage and was super excited to understand like this cable goes here, and now we can label it and we understand. Or this DI box is for the bass, like let's put that on there. So
Hmm.
it was cool to see them do a lot of that.
It reminds me of another. You told us another story of another client you're just working with, who, uh, I think that she just randomly found a A10 Production Studio 4K switcher because you guys were like, you're having her like just follow these cables, like where are they going? And there's and she was like nowhere. It's like they're not plugged
Yep.
into anything, and it's just like okay, let's get rid of them, clean it out, and like that's what
yep.
so much, especially churches. If your church has been around for a while, you have different people who have gone through before you. It really is helpful to strip down these systems to the kind of the bare essentials of what you need, and then you'll discover there's probably a whole bunch of gear in there cluttering things that you don't need. You could sell that gear, you could make money, you could get better gear from it. Lots of things you could do.
Yep. Yeah. And the person that we were just talking about too, she told me like, oh, I realized what was going on with how much junk there is here, and I just spent some time cleaning up, and it just feels so much better. And I'm sure when the volunteers walk in and they see it's clean, they're like, it's easier to serve in this capacity because I'm not distracted by, wait, what is that and where is it going? It's like I only see what I have to deal with. So
Yep.
Mm,
yeah, but when you're just like day to day, like I need to get things done, and right now it's working. There's no reason to mess with it.
yeah.
You usually don't take action until there's a problem that you need
Yep.
to resolve.
Yep. And usually you don't have enough time to properly resolve it, and it's overwhelming, it's defeating, and been there, done
Yeah,
that for sure. And so much of it, like they said, it just comes from understanding the basics of what we have, how it works. And then when troubleshooting comes, you have a list of things of what could go wrong. And then you just work through the list to troubleshoot and fix it.
yeah.
But, so
What
was
did you
that,
use to set them up with like with the schematic of their, flow? Like when you were kind of recording where the inputs and outputs were and this cable is going here, what did you use as your tool to like hand off to them before you left?
So I gave them a link to like specifically for the audio and how that mix works. I gave them a link to one of the PDFs in one of our lessons in the Mixing for Worship course. So it's like, here's this document. It shows you every single channel. So like kick drum, snare, vocal, whatever it is going to a bus. Okay, where is that bus going? Okay, it's going to the matrix, or it's going to the mains, and that's also being sent to a vocal reverb or a drum reverb. So they were able to just like take that document that is available to them in the course and just recreate it to their
Cool.
specific setup.
Yep. The
Nice.
worship mixing blueprint in
Yeah.
the mixing for worship course. So yeah, and so are we on with day one still, or are we on day two
Yeah,
yet? Or
the days kind of, yeah, so that was day 2, was a lot of continuing cleanup and just getting the mixing console to a state where it's easy to walk up to and understand what's happening, like labeling properly, color coding, confirming that each and every single channel has the correct input from the routing, because we changed the routing, adding those new drum microphones, or those, not microphones, but drum channels. So it's like, okay, we're going to completely rebuild your list of your patch sheet so that your patch sheet is up to date. Then we're going to make sure that all of the routing on the console is done properly, and that things are not going to places that they don't need to. So that when, and then also for virtual sound check and for broadcast mix, that all the routing is the way it needs to be. Because I would hate for me to like make all these changes and then on Sunday morning be like, well, we don't have signal into this. So every
Yeah.
single channel we plugged either a click loop or a microphone into on the stage. So it's like, okay, pocket A, channel 1 is going to this stage box number. That stage box input or preamp is routed to the console properly, and then that channel is going to this mix bus, or it's going to the mains. It's controlled by a specific DCA. We just got it to where you step up to the console and you can just start mixing, and it makes sense the way that it's laid out with the channels, the way that you can view the effects sends. Really just reconfigured their console, but also confirmed that all the routing is what it needed to be, so that on Sunday, I was there on Sunday as well and was able to serve. I just kind of hung out. I was like, hey, I'm here. If you have questions about how to do the mix, if you have questions with broadcast or something else, I'm just hanging out. But the volunteers were able to immediately step into that role and feel confident to serve in whatever capacity. So the third day
oh, I want
was,
to also say about the mixing console.
yeah,
That's a was it Yamaha? So it was CL
TF5 or
QL5.
QL5.
QL5, and that Yamaha is those are consoles like we don't, most of our students and customers like don't have that level of console, but you, understanding pretty much all things mixing, were able to still help them out and organize it, right? Like you just referenced the owner's manual if you had a question about where do I find this processing or routing feature, and then you're able to still implement the same mixing blueprint on this console.
Yeah, it was just taking the concept and translating it to that specific device.
Yep. Yep.
So that was a big part of it, was doing that. Their Pro Presenter, like this kind of to Luke's question about like cleaning things up, there were like 40 different looks or like themes. And one of the things that they had told me was like, our volunteers are stressed out because if this certain look isn't on, they don't know where to find it. And it's like, well, what looks do you use? Okay, you have 3 looks or themes that you use. We're just going to delete everything else, and we're going to make sure that these 3 themes are working exactly the way that they need to. And I recorded a short tutorial video of just me hitting screen record and saying, hey, this is the new setup for Pro Presenter. If you run into this issue, here's the resolution. And anyone with a computer can do that. If the computer has a microphone on it, you can just open up QuickTime, hit screen capture, and show people, what you're doing. So that was cool because in the future, if they want to teach someone how to do something, they now have the understanding of how do I record one of these things to teach my tech volunteers instead of me telling every single person on Sunday morning as we're trying to get things going, I'm leading worship, so I've got to stop leading the band and come back here and show them. So we also got them started on a Google site. So I was like, hey, let's build a Google site. You can put all
Nice.
of these videos in there. All your volunteers can have access to that link. So if they have a question, they probably can find the answer there.
Love it. Man, standard
That's clutch.
operating procedures. That
Yep.
is the boring but most important helpful thing. Like, gosh, it's just like I see it all the time of like so many worship ministries are struggling because they don't have this boring thing implemented in it, an SOP. And I'm just like, I don't know. I don't know what to say other than just do it. Make them and do it and be consistent with it. Build the systems. I was listening to the Jocko Willenick podcast the other day. He's the Navy SEAL dude, and he just talks about with the SEALs, like the reason we like the SEALs are so high caliber and they know how to handle high stress situations is because they have standard operating procedures and everybody knows what needs to happen. Given whatever situation, because if they didn't follow their SOPs, someone would die. Right.
Yep.
And the stakes aren't quite as high here with worship ministry, but same principle of like, if you don't have standard operating procedures or systems, if you don't understand all the building blocks of it, then when things matter, like on a Sunday morning and things go wrong, then it's just going to be chaos and really frustrating. But then when they do go wrong, you have standard operating procedures for fixing those things quickly.
And you can't even make the argument that you don't have the time to make them, because if you're doing the job by creating the slides or setting up the mix or whatever, you can just record yourself doing that, and then you don't have to edit it. It doesn't need to be fancy. Just upload that somewhere and you can refine the document or the instructions later. Do that in some other time, but just have some process somewhere that's viewable to other people.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I probably interrupted you somewhere in there, Adam, for whatever day you were on.
I think
I mean, so far,
yeah, that was mostly day 3.
okay.
And then at the end of day 3 is when we had the volunteers come. So that was like, hey, if you have questions, let's address them. But also, here's the bigger picture. Here's some vision casting for why these changes are being made, why Chris and Casey, had me out there and what they wanted to accomplish and what things will look like moving forward. And then was able to just, be there for, hey, I don't understand how this is going to work, or I want to get my hands on the Aviom and play with it, or let's look at the mixing console in person together. And, I have a question. How do you access this, or how do you do that? And part of it too is, here's my setup, use this, but also if you want to change how this looks because your brain works a different way, or you'd prefer, the fader for the vocal to be in this spot instead of that spot, like, here's how you change that and feel confident in getting it set for you instead of just using whatever week-to-week changes has happened over the last few years.
Got it. Awesome, man.
Killer.
Yeah, and then day 4 was Sunday. So again, day 3 I was able to show the volunteers, here's all this stuff, how it works, what changes we made, make sure you're confident for that. So Sunday, they were able to do their job confidently, and I was just hanging out, making sure that if anything went wrong, I was available. One of the things that went wrong was their computer for broadcast audio failed, and there was a backup thing in place, but there was no documentation. It wasn't explained to anyone. So I had to trace cables and figure out, here's how you get the audio, the backup audio from the mixing console. So now that's going to be labeled, Casey knows, hey, if there's an issue, this is how you default to a matrix mix from the console instead of the broadcast audio.
Nice.
Good. It's a good fail safe.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's crazy there's probably, I bet you left there feeling like, man, there's even a whole other 4 days of stuff we could keep working on. But that was such a good a good start, and so much can get done, can be done. And that's what, ever since we last year, especially, I mean, how many weeks did we spend in South Fellowship overhauling a lot of stuff there? And there's still stuff that could be done. And then here I've spent days at Grace Church, making these improvements, and experiencing similar deal where it's like, we have all the right gear. If we're buying things, it's more like, how can we buy things to organize things and clean things up? It's not like buying a ton of new, larger pieces of gear. So, love it, man. Thanks for sharing that journey. And we're excited to do this. We had a few other churches sign up already since then. You'll be doing a few more trips. We'll probably make more videos like this, kind of doing a recap of what you did. Hopefully people pull some ideas away how they could implement this in their church. And if you're listening to this video and you're like, hey, I want to have Adam come out and help us do the same type of thing, then definitely click the link below, schedule a strategy session. You'll chat with Eric. He's our enrollment coach for worship ministry school, and we'll make sure that it's a good fit. He'll make sure, I'll even put my eyes on it too, if it makes sure that we can really help you out. And if we can, then we'll let you know, and then you'll be able to enroll. So thanks so much for watching or listening. We'll see you guys next time.